Trump says Facebook is a true enemy of the people over election interference, urges restrictions on political spending. Trump's not wrong. He said TikTok is less of a danger to the U.S. than Meta, which is a true enemy of the people. They spent $500 million against me and our great Republican Party, locked boxes and all, and should never have been allowed to do that. TikTok didn't. Like crooked Joe Biden, Facebook is a great threat to democracy and will only get bigger and stronger if TikTok is taken out. Do them both and restrict the money allowed to be spent on politics and lock boxes by Meta and Facebook. He's not wrong. I think the issue of banning TikTok is it's fine if it's isolated to just what TikTok is. I don't care for the argument that Facebook would get stronger. I mean, Facebook is a problem as it is, but it's a different problem. That being said, we absolutely should be restricting Facebook, but that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, and I don't know how they tax their revenues, or if it's financially detrimental to use their funding towards political spending. Like they certainly don't get a tax benefit for doing that. But hey, why not have competing platforms donate to other candidates towards Donald Trump? Maybe X and Elon Musk could support him in those ways.
They met, but they haven't had Elon Musk said that he had not made any political contributions.
Yeah, and even if we ban the political contributions, I mean, the algorithms are still going to support one candidate over the other, probably on.
I say we just ban all social media, just all of it. Get rid of it. Everyone's got to watch CNN from now on. We'll get Chris Cuomo back on the air, and that will just that'll solve everything. If everyone was just ignorant of the world,
I don't know. I like exposing what's happening in the school system too much on social media.
That's your thing.
I mean,
knowledge makes people unhappy. We should keep them ignorant so they can remain
we're
happy.
all happy. Everything's great.
Yeah.
I mean, we were even exposing school districts illegally influencing elections in Texas right before the primary.
Wow.
They were using their school district taxpayer resources to lobby for or against specific candidates, which you can't do. Attorney General Ken Paxton laid down the law on at least 7 districts.
Well, we talked to, on the Culture War podcast last week, a couple of former congressional staffers, and I didn't even realize how Congress worked. I had no idea, even to this point.
It doesn't.
I had no
What
idea.
do you mean?
When you get elected into Congress, you have to write a check for money to the Republican or Democratic Party in order to get assigned your position so you have political power. Quite literally, Matt Gaetz gets elected and said, I want these committees. And they said, well, maybe if you raise money for us, and you'll need to raise, each district has a bid, they call it, where depending on the wealth of the district, you are required to give a certain amount of money. So
that's messed
Matt
up.
Gaetz said, if I write a check for $500,000 right now, what committees do I get? They said, any committee you want. He says, done. And he wrote him a check for $500,000. That's Congress. I had no idea that's how it actually operated.
Pay to play. Is it like insurance too, though? Whereas if you're an incumbent, they'll defend you on election day. So like,
if you are not giving money to the party, they'll primary against you.
Yeah.
And they'll keep you out. And so naturally, they were very much opposed to Laura Loomer getting in. And I knew there was money in politics, but I didn't realize.
I didn't know that either, I got to say.
You got to pay money.
That is messed up.
At least in the Republican Party, Democrats probably do something similar.
Yeah, they probably do, because Democrats are grifters as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it works like this in the Texas House as well. We had Dade Phelan forced into a runoff, our speaker, and he goes and pours a ton of his campaign war chest to defend a lot of the anti-school choice incumbents, and we took out a bunch of them on Super Tuesday. But they protect their own once they're in, and they just kind of listen to what the speaker says in a lot of the places.
And then the other crazy thing is that when you are in, like people talk about how it's easier for incumbents to win. You want to know
95% of the time they win.
Do you know why?
They have more money. They have name recognition.
Because the government gives them money they can use to campaign. So in Congress, they get a budget. They can spend whatever they want. And the rule is they can't say, vote for me and I will do this. They can say, I just did this thing. Here's me. I'm your congressman.
It's implied.
Exactly.
Vote for me. Yeah.
Yep.
That should not be. I didn't know that. They actually gave him money.
Yeah, they were telling us on Culture War the story of this guy who used like basically his entire campaign office budget on mailers, sending out saying like, here's what I've done, here's what I'm doing, here's who I am, thumbs up, and he had to fire all of his staff because he ran out of money.
Wow.
Yep, that's crazy. The whole thing,
He was like, make sure you get those mailers out the door before you go. Pack up your desk and take it to
they
the
get
post
around
office.
a lot of these little law, like in Texas with the school district stuff. They get around the laws, like even if they're not saying vote for or against this particular measure or person, they'll say you're not going to get a raise next year, teachers. I know you're just trying to scrape by and make ends meet, but if we don't raise spending with $1 billion bond that the voters have to pass, well, you're not going to get your raise. So that's basically implied, like you better go, or we're going to have to cut some staff. You might lose your job if you don't go vote for this. So it's implied what they're doing.
Yep.
Even if not explicit.
There's no Congress. I think that's the takeaway I got from these former staffers who are breaking down how it operates. I'm like, if you think there's a system where people get elected and then go to DC and then advocate for bill, it's not absolutely not true. And that the reality is it is a dirty game where people do favors and cut backroom deals. They need to raise $300,000 based on their district, so they go to lobbyists. And I think they were even saying too, where it's like, okay, you're from what district? Oh, here's a corporation that'll write the check for you. And then they're able to muster up funds that can deliver those funds to the NRCC or other NGOs that get that money in somehow.
And it makes it almost impossible to hold politicians accountable for infringing on our rights and doing things that they didn't promise on the campaign trail.
that's messed
because
up.
they win about 95% of the time, you're not going to get the churn you need to actually be able to hold them accountable at the ballot box. And it's rough. And maybe making things like using your Congress's funds illegal to campaign for yourself would be a step in the right direction.
It is illegal to campaign.
But if you do it in this, so clamping down on the definition of campaigning.
I mean, it's just tough. Like if something is happening, you want your constituents to know, well, that's fair, right? Mm-hmm. Like there will be a vote coming up. Thank you. And that's the general idea, but it can be used. There's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. We try to come up with all these ways to cut loopholes, but people will always figure out a way to get through them. I suppose we could just say, when you see it, knock it off, right? We get what you're doing. But I think the reality is people think Congress is dysfunctional. I think I just learned last week there's not even a Congress. It's just fake.
That's really scary, in fact.
Yeah.
I didn't know you had to give money to the party. That's like when board members on not-for-profits have to give money to the thing they're supporting. But if you're on the board of the Met, it's because you want to give a bunch of money to the Met.
Let me tell you how nonprofits work.
Or you get on the board because you gave a bunch of money.
Right.
Here's what you do.
Part of it too.
You want to run a nonprofit? Okay, the first thing you can't do is make a lot of money. If you make a lot of money, people are going to say, I don't need to give to you. You make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But then the problem is what happens if you become successful? Oof, now you're in a conundrum.
Increase your expenses.
Well, no, it's easier than that. You create a 501c3 and a 501c4. We'll call one like the Truth in Media Foundation and then a Truth in Media Fund. And the fund will be a 501c4 and the foundation will be a 501c3. And then what you do is when you go around raising money, you say, we're with Truth in Media, excise the last word, show what Truth in Media Foundation does every day in fighting for truth and justice, and then ask them to make a donation to the fund. Mm-hmm. The fund never discloses how much money it makes. The fund pays you a salary of $1 million a year. The fund then donates $737,000 per year to the foundation. The foundation then publishes all of its earnings. This year, we raised this much money. Our executive got paid $35,000. And you go, you see, I only got paid $35,000.
From the C3 arm.
From the C3 arm. And the 501c4 is not publicly disclosed and is allowed to lobby. So you use the 501c3 as your public-facing do-gooder arm. Then you use the 501c4 to actually take all the donations.
Right.
But there's a complication here. I'm on a
C3
C3 and a C4. And we have a PAC as well. But it's harder to raise money for political purposes than it is with C3 because the donors can write off their C3 contributions. So it's actually in the best interest of the nonprofit to pay more out through the C3 than the C4.
Unless your revenue is getting too high and it's starting to compromise your ability to fundraise. So there's an upper limit. Certainly, a lot of nonprofits will say, just give to the C3. Sometimes you'll catch this. If you ever have someone asking you for money for a cause, and they're explaining a cause that is absolutely protected. Like if someone says, we want to, provide sporting equipment to schools. Mm-hmm. Okay, that should be tax deductible, right? I donate to you and you're helping kids. That's tax deductible. And then they go, but because of the work we do, it's not tax deductible, but it's still important. That means they're redirecting your funds to a 501c4.
Yeah. Okay.
And something is up. But the general idea is if you can put as much funds as possible into the C4, you can pay your executives 6-figure, 7-figure salaries. And then when people come to, your meetings or whatever, and they're like, you are doing this, be like, I only get paid $50,000 a year. Why should I even bother? I'm sacrificing. And it's true. You're not lying.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, but people can look up my salaries on the 990 forms, and we have C3, C4, and PAC. So if I guess they'd have to look up both entities and then add them together. It's more difficult.
And typically, depending on how you obfuscate this, right, you can call one like the Political Acquisition and Research Foundation, and no one's ever heard of it. And that's the company that takes in all the donations without people realizing it. Certainly anybody who's digging can find through 990s your salary, but then you can say, that's a totally different company. Right. As the executive of, so there have been some very large nonprofits, international NGOs. I recommend this. Anybody who's curious about the NGOs that are funding all this illegal immigration, go to, what's that website? Man, do you know which website that's got all the 990s
AFCVF.com.
Is that?
And you can contribute to AFC Victory Fund.
No, this isn't about you right now.
So you want to look up the 990 tax form, and there's a website that has GuideStar. I think it's GuideStar.
GuideStar, that's the one.
Yeah, you'll find the 990
and
forms.
Nonprofit Explorer, right? Is that one, or ProPublica?
I don't know. GuideStar's the one I think GuideStar's the one that I've always used. And you can look up the salaries of anyone. So find an NGO and you can see how much money they're making. You can see how much money they brought in, and you will probably be very surprised. But the thing is, nobody looks. Mm-hmm. So we know a lot of these NGOs, especially when it comes to illegal immigration, are getting fat paychecks.
Well, and some of them also distinctly hide their assets and where their money comes from, because you can also be a not-for-profit and have an umbrella organization over you, and then you never see any of that not-for-profit's work. You never see their money. I was looking, because I was discovering that when I was looking for the who funds the Students for Justice Palestine. And it was definitely very hard to get to the bottom of that.
Did you find any teachers unions?
I did not actually get to the bottom of it. Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's always hard when they just create them too, right? If they haven't been around for a couple of years, you're not going to see
right
basically anything.
Because nonprofits don't have to file.
There's lags.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now I want you to spend the rest of every day finding this stuff. I'm so fascinated.
I always want to go digging around and finding this stuff, but I have this job and I have to do my job, and I can't just go dig around.
You can't just take a sabbatical from editing and posting and running Post Millennial?
No, I can't for some reason.
I think this is crazy. Your rights are being trampled.
Right?
This is a hate crime.
This is a hate crime. No, but I love doing that kind of research.
We have a lot of union front groups, and it does take a lot of researching in Texas. They set up a PAC called Defend Rural Texas, and it's actually headquartered in Austin, which is not a rural area, and it's funded by the union, and then they're funding Republicans that way instead of publicly endorsing them. They're privately funding them through a PAC.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.